For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith alongside Connor Morrissette for instant analysis from USC's Wednesday evening practice of Nevada Week. We got a lot to talk about today, a lot of interviewees yet again, including the media debut after practice for Zachariah Branch. We got to talk to offensive line coach Josh Henson, tons of other guys, including Heisman winner Caleb Williams. But before we get into all that, Connor, what were some of your biggest takeaways from practice?
We didn't get to see too much today, and Jack, great to be joined with you. I'm enjoying doing instant with you. The biggest takeaway, Christian Pierce, a little bit of a learning experience from him. Raleigh Brown was a ball carrier in a drill where the safety runs toward the ball carrier, starts running first, and then a coach will allow the ball carrier, to run. So he starts a little bit late, and Raleigh Brown, we know how shifty he is. He kind of juked out Christian Pierce a little bit, and then Alex Grinch said, do it again. And then Pierce did another rep, learning experience for him. So just a young guy and a guy with a little bit more experience kind of going over the top against a younger player. So I thought that was interesting. But Tackett Curtis still with the ones in the pursuit drill. Overall, couldn't really take away too much from today. Didn't see a lot of action, but my biggest thing was Christian Pierce.
I think we'll got to wait to see some of the more rotation on the defense and the offensive line, see that shakes out on Saturday against Nevada. But after practice was kind of the big deal. We got to talk to a bunch of different people. We mentioned offensive line coach Josh Henson. The one coach we get to talk to on Wednesdays is either him or Dennis Simmons. Today was Henson. What did you take away from his thoughts on the offensive line?
He said he's pleased with the competition, but he didn't sound very happy. So USC fans, I'm sure everyone watching this is familiar with how the offensive line shook out. It looks like Justin Diedich is a surefire starter at center, Jonah Monheim's surefire starter at left tackle, and then three other spots on the line are all sort of up for grabs. You have the right tackle spot. Michael Tarquin and Mason Murphy are battling, even though Murphy played some left tackle later in the game. On the inside, Alani Noah and Emmanuel Prignon are battling at the left guard spot, and then Jarrett Kingston and Gino Quinones are fighting it out to play right guard, and Quinones plays a little backup center too. So there's an ongoing competition, and it's going into now the second week of football for USC. And I asked Coach Henson, is that rare? Is it rare to not have that 5 set as you go into the second week? And he said, no, I've experienced before, and there's two sides of the coin. You can be happy everyone's competing. You got 7 or 8 guys who you feel comfortable playing, but on the flip side, you want to get a 5, and you want to get to that point where you have the unit who Caleb Williams knows that's going to be who's protecting him on a game-to-game basis. So I thought that was really interesting. The competition is ongoing, and Coach Henson, he said he expects a lot of rotation against Nevada, even though Lincoln Riley earlier in the week said they might limit that a little bit, at least on the offensive line. It sounds like we will still see a lot of guys moving around, a lot of guys playing one spot, one drive, maybe on the bench the next drive, maybe a different position on the next drive. Expect a lot of changes with that O-line.
Yeah, USC had this to a smaller extent last year where the left tackle position was really the one that was up in the air. It was either Cortland Ford or Bobby Haskins. This time, I think it kind of continues with the theme that USC was trying to get with this roster, which is every position is going to be up for grabs. And you mentioned those 2 veterans that have been here for a while, and Diedich and Monheim. Those are guys that aren't rotating. But USC is just trying to see who sticks, get the most out of their guys through competition. We got to talk with Gino Quinones as well, who said, the competition is what forces us to go out there and really, go at our best every day because you are competing for a different spot. I thought Quinones was a really good interview today as well after practice. What did you take away from that?
He was a little under the weather, had a little bit of a cold, but Ahmad, our colleague at USCFootball.com, asked him what it was like to have his father in the stands. Their family's from Hawaii, don't get a chance to come to USC a lot, just geographics, of course. And he started to tear up a little bit. He was touched that his dad was there. It meant a lot to him. And then the other thing that I learned from Gino today that I thought was really interesting, Jack, just how much of a critic he is on himself. He is very hard on himself. And you know how sometimes people say something, you're like, okay, I don't really believe if he's that hard on himself. You could, if you watch the interview, and it'll be up here on USCFootball.com any minute now, he is just his own biggest critic. He said his dad is very critical, and it's all because they want to get to the best possible level. And I think when you're at USC and you play pretty well, I thought Gino had a great game against San José State. Never being satisfied is so important when you're competing for a spot. So I thought that was something that I took away from this interview today. And honestly, I know you can't like players in journalism, but I found myself kind of being like, okay, Gino Quinones, I can't say I'm a fan, but he kind of gained a new fan today a little bit in me. I'll say it.
Well, he's definitely on that good guy list award for the season. And, he mentioned he's very critical of himself. I think it is, as you're right, in a good way, trying to be a better player every day. He mentioned just basically, if you ask him, can you improve on that? And he says yes to everything. He can always improve. Man, yeah. Obviously had a good camp, won the starting job at guard. His dad was in attendance, and he was asked, hey, did your dad say good job after the game? He's like, yeah, he did, but I didn't really believe him. And so he's clearly, hard on himself, trying to push himself to be the best player he can be. I wouldn't say it's definitely in a negative negative way at all.
Yeah, and what was interesting, too, when he was asked, when did you find out about starting and what was your reaction? He said, right before the game, and my reaction was, let's play. And then he was asked about his dad, and that's what brought out the tears a little bit. So I thought, he wasn't touched that he was starting. It was cool that he was, but he was touched that his father was watching him play. And how can you not love that?
The offensive line was a big discussion kind of everywhere today. Caleb Williams was asked a similar question that Justin Dedich was asked after the game, which is how hard is it to be consistent when the guys on the offensive line are changing? And he kind of had the same answer, saying, we practiced it in camp. We've been rotating this entire time. Competition went on through camp, so it's not like they had the same 5 and they decided to rotate during the game. So, they're kind of keeping it under wraps, but they are trying to be consistent. Caleb mentioned he has to be patient for the offensive line to continue to gel, and it was kind of the answer that we were expecting, but Caleb was talking a lot about the offensive line as well.
Yeah, he, of course, as the quarterback, wants to have a consistent group of 5, but another big talking point from today was you have the Heisman Trophy winner as the quarterback. You can have some kinks on the offensive line because the guy behind them is so talented. So I'm sure he wants to get that settled, and I'm sure he trusts the coaching staff to get that settled. But I thought that was interesting, too. A lot of the guys said, we can make some mistakes, and Coach Henson always talks about don't want to lose fast. But even if a guy does lose fast occasionally, Caleb Williams is so talented that he can get out of pressure. So I don't think that's ideal, obviously. You don't want to lose too fast. You want to put your best foot forward on the offensive line. Having a guy like Caleb Williams, though, under center helps a whole lot when going through a transition on the O-line like USC is doing right now.
And as we've mentioned, it makes it even more important to have an offensive line that's solidified in front of him so you can keep him healthy, because USC season is nothing without Caleb Williams, as we know, being the Heisman Trophy winner. The only other really big note from Caleb's press conference, I asked him, what have you seen from Nevada? And he echoed a similar sentiment to yesterday's. Some of the guys were talking about, we've got a game of tape on ourselves, but we don't have a game of tape yet on Nevada because this is week 2 for USC basically, but week 1 for Nevada. And he said he expects Nevada obviously to come up pretty amped because it is their first week of the season, and they can look back to last year's tape on a team that went 2-10, but there's a lot of transfers on the team. It's the second year for the head coach and the defensive coordinator, and they're not really sure what to make of it. So you go in, you can maybe expect some things because it is the second year under the system, but also you haven't seen him play yet this year, so it is a little bit of an unknown.
USC's lucky that it's not LSU a year from now, a team that they would play first and not have any tape on. When it's a team like Nevada and you're a 38-point favorite, it makes it a lot easier, Jack. You know what I mean? The fact that, they don't really know what to expect. The talent gap is just going to be so wide, and I know I sound like a USC honk being on the USCFootball.com YouTube channel right now, but when the spread's that large, I don't have to even make that argument. USC should win big, even if they don't really know what Nevada's going to do. It certainly will add a little bit of a wrinkle, and maybe they'll have something up their sleeve trying to upset the number 6 team in the country. But I think a lot of today was coach and player speak, good team, and we got to put our best foot forward. The reality is a few off plays, a few mistakes, should be able to navigate your way through that.
Last couple notes come from some of Caleb's weapons, Marshawn Lloyd as well as Zachariah Branch. What did you take away from them too?
I thought Marshawn Lloyd, it was really interesting. Lincoln Riley earlier in the week talked about how Lloyd came out kind of antsy. He was playing a little bit too fast. And the really cool note that we learned from Lloyd today, he talked to Cliff Kingsbury at halftime of the San José State game, and he said, how can I get better? What am I doing wrong? And he told him to slow down, go out there, do what you do. And look what happened. Lincoln Riley said he was much better in the second half. I thought he was much better in the second half. And Lloyd said he was much better in the second half. So across the board, everyone was happy, including Lloyd, with his second half performance. And it was really Cliff Kingsbury who spurred that on.
And one of the first times that we've heard about Kingsbury making an effect on a player that isn't a quarterback. Of course, we expected him as an offensive analyst to come in and help with quarterbacks because that's what he's done such a good job of. He also mentioned, I think it was Miller Moss that said, Cliff Kingsbury said it earlier, that Lincoln Riley is one of the best offensive minds in the history of the sport, and that's what he will go down as. So Kingsbury, of course, knows a lot about offense in general, and he was a big help to Marshawn Lloyd. And then you asked a really cool question of Zachariah Branch, got a pretty cool answer as well.
I just asked him, and I didn't really know what he was going to say. How has your life changed since your big debut? And he said, a lot of people have reached out to me. The coolest one was Odell Beckham, a guy who I've looked up to since I was little. So, just imagine that, Jack. You return a kick for a score in your debut at USC. Obviously a highly rated recruit. A lot of people know his name, but then Odell Beckham, that's just a different galaxy of a guy reaching out to you. So I'm sure even Branch was starstruck, a guy who a lot of people would be starstruck by him if they met him, especially on this campus. So that was really cool to see.
And the funny part was he mentioned that he reached out to Beckham a couple months ago. I don't know what he said over DM, but he kind of slid into the DMs, left Beckham a message, and he was left on, I don't know if it was read or just delivered. And then Odell, I guess, realized after the game he probably saw him play and then reached back out. But you're probably thinking Odell is looking at that. He's like, oh, just another high school guy reaching out, maybe a little bit flattered, but doesn't know what to expect. Then he sees him go out, have 232 all-purpose yards, and he's like, oh, now I have to respond.
He did something that, warranted a response. You're right. Maybe if Odell did see it, hey, you're just a high school kid. Yeah, you got 5 stars, but let's wait until you do something. I'm sure what happened was I think maybe he wanted to reach out to him. He saw it and he said, hey, I'm gonna reach out to this kid. Maybe he did see the message before. I don't know. But you're right. Zachariah certainly warranted a response based on his first game, and I'm really excited to see what he does in game 2, just like USC Nation, I'm sure.
Do you have any other notes from practice today, different interviews before we head on to Saturday and the game against Nevada?
No, nothing really jumps out. Jonah Monheim talked about how I asked him, you're one of the established starters. What's it like watching this competition unfold and being a part of it, even though you're one of the established guys? And he said, well, I'm still competing for my job every day, but competition is really good. So they're trying to look at the offensive line competition as a positive. I think Henson, if you asked him off the record, he would say, yeah, competition's good, but we want to get to that 5. So I think the next few weeks, the next few days, however long it takes, look for USC to really try to narrow that down, get the consistent 5. I'm sure a few weeks from now against Arizona, that's kind of when it all starts. So you need that constant 5 by then. They have a few weeks to get it figured out, and I think they will.
Well, it's kind of like the more football we see, the more we learn, and the more it gets solidified. So we'll have to just wait and see. The next couple games, Saturday against Nevada, kickoff, I believe, 3 p.m. from the Coliseum. It'll be USC week 2 and everyone else week 1 for the most part. And so we'll see a lot of people maybe overreacting after the first week of the season. So I guess we'll see the discourse after the second game. USC's favored by 38. We expect them to win, and we'll have more predictions on Tunnel Vision tomorrow night. Instead of going live at 7, we'll be live at 5 p.m. on Inside Troy here on YouTube. Make sure you're checking out USCfootball.com for all the different articles, the interviews posted today. For Connor Morrissette, I'm Jack Smith. Check out USCfootball.com for more.